stay seated to kind of keep us casual here, but thank you so much for everyone for coming to our writers workshop. I don't want to talk too long. I'm just going to run us all through some of the basics of Folklore Magazine, what it is, what we're looking for in submissions, a little bit about our new writer's guides and how to submit, and then we'll just maybe have some discussion and questions. So how does that sound? Sounds good? All right, yeah, okay, I'll try not to talk too long. Yay, so there's a lot on this slide. Don't worry too much about it. This is when we advertised the writers workshop. We asked folks to say when they signed up what it was they were looking for, so they were hoping to meet other people. I think we did that pretty good already. Just some better protocols for submitting folklore and heritage articles, some inspiration, get a bit of an understanding of our readership, and learn about the new submission guidelines. So Folklore Magazine has been in print since 1979. It's still available in print to about 500 members, and we estimate that each edition is actually read by about 2,000 people. So we know that because on a recent survey, we asked folks to say how many people they shared their copy with, and based on that, we estimate that about 2,000 people read each edition. So people do share quite a bit. What's it all about? So it's a people stories magazine. So it's a really unique source for Saskatchewan history because it's history through the lens of lived experiences. So it's unique stories that shed light on what it's like to be from Saskatchewan. Sometimes an individual person's story is really what gives you the sense of a place, and that's really what it offers. And that's a great value because, of course, everyone has a story. So everyone has something that they can contribute to Folklore Magazine. It's a balance of personal stories and research pieces. And again, it's that fine-grained lens on history. So it's history through that lived experience. And it's very daily life as well. So we had a survey in 2021. And folks mostly agree, 84% agreeing that each edition of Folklore has a variety of different things. So there's no unique or uniform editorial voice because every piece is written by a different author. So I always like to say, if you don't like what's in Folklore, turn the page, because there'll be something else, and so it varies from edition to edition. Yeah, so it's something for everyone. The other thing it's important to mention is that it's okay to have stuff in Folklore that doesn't necessarily happen on Saskatchewan soil, because it may have happened in Canada or even somewhere else in the world, but that may really influence how someone lives their life in Saskatchewan now. So it doesn't have to have happened on Saskatchewan soil to be something that could be in Folklore. And generally speaking, people who took the survey agreed that folks, that generally there's a good balance between research, history pieces, and personal experience stories. So people are pretty happy with that kind of balance. So who's currently reading Folklore Magazine? So in 2017, we asked our subscribers to say a bit about themselves and their occupations. Got a lot of folks who were former teachers, former healthcare professionals, people in editing or publishing, writers and farmers, so and a bit of an older demographic there as well. So in our more recent survey, 43% of respondents were over 75, and when we take that to over 55, it's about 84. So we do have quite an older membership at the moment, although we are slowly starting to see some growth in new memberships, which we're kind of attributing to a bit more of a social media presence, kind of boosting things that way. And those new readers tend to be a little bit younger, more in the 30 to 55 year age range. So folks are getting a little bit younger. That's a good sign. So a lot of things came out of that survey. It was a super helpful survey for me, especially to kind of really hone in on the values of Folklore Magazine as community, personal, regional, local histories. And some of the recommendations that came out was to encourage writers, particularly to pursue partnerships and encourage authors whose perspectives are currently underrepresented. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. Also bolster readership in that 40 to 60 year range. So for History and Folklore Society, we do have actually youth programs where we have things for younger people, people under 20, that kind of thing. But for Folklore Magazine, when we're thinking our younger subscribers are actually talking kind of 40. So we're still quite a bit of an older demographic, but it's that 40 to 60 year range, which in some of our experiences when folks start to get really interested in history and heritage. And I always like to say when you're really little, you say to your parents, where do I come from? And when you hit about 40, you say, where do I come from historically? And start to try to figure that out. So another recommendation that came out of it is just do a visual update as well. The cover hasn't been updated for some time, so that's one thing to work on as well. And also consider a new name. Most of the folks who are familiar with the magazine associate the word folklore with what they get in the magazine, which is those regional, personal, community type histories. But it's possible that potentially new readers who are just looking at it for the first time, because the word folklore can have a lot of different associations, sometimes it can mean things that aren't really true, or things like that. Sometimes the word folklore might not, for a new potential reader, be the best conveyance of what it is you're going to get when you open the magazine. So a good chance that we want to look at doing a name change at some point in the future. So those are some recommendations there. So writing for folklore. In the last couple of years, we've been doing a bit of a review of our criteria for submissions, and especially in the last summer, we just revamped our writer's guide a little bit to kind of reflect some of those things. So I'm going to kind of run us through that here. These writer guides will all have copies with us here today, and these are also going to be available on the web, and of course, as always, available in print from our office whenever someone gives us a call. So who can publish in folklore? Absolutely anyone. You don't have to be a professional writer. You just have to have a great story. As part of our strategic plan, we're also focusing on expanding perspectives that are from groups that have been traditionally underrepresented. So appealing to and centering the experiences of historically underrepresented groups, including people who are newcomers, Indigenous, and LGBTQ2S+. So looking for those traditionally underrepresented stories for our magazine. What types of work can I submit? This hasn't changed too much from our old writer guides. So people stories, those personal experience stories, those research pieces with references, poetry or songs. We haven't had a song in a while, but we do accept them. Book reviews, feature photographs. In our last survey, a lot of folks said feature photographs were their favorite thing, and even more, a whole bunch more said it was their second favorite thing right after the stories. So feature photographs are always great, and they're great if you're short on time. If you don't feel like you have time to write a whole story, you can always send in a photo with a few lines saying what it is. So oral histories as well. So for whatever reason, not everyone wants to be a writer. Not everyone wants to write their story down, but they still have a great story. And so we really want to have opportunities for folks who might not be a writer to still get a story into Folklore Magazine. And so that means things like if someone wants to connect with us and have us record an oral history with someone and work with them to turn that into an article, even art pieces, anything that can be conveyed in the magazine format, all those types of things are great. Possibly doing a translation if English isn't someone's first language, doing a recording or an oral history in an original language and having a translation and both languages together in the magazine would be great so people can enjoy it in both languages. So lots of different options for folks who, for whatever reason, might not want to write a story, but still have a good story to tell. How often can I submit? We do have kind of a huge backlog of pieces. So as part of our revised writer guidelines, we have some guidelines around how often, you can submit as often as you want, but some guidelines around how often contributors can publish. So, and this is still quite a lot of stuff. So 2 long-form articles per year, 2 feature photographs, 4 book reviews, 4 poems. You do get paid for Folklore Magazine, $1.50 per column inch, so it is a paid authorship, which is so very rare for a magazine of this type, so that's always a great thing. Submission deadlines, you can submit any time. I think the only thing to really remember with that is it's just a seasonality. So if you have a Christmas story, try to get it in for the winter deadline, otherwise you might wait a year until the next winter edition comes around. Sometimes we're seasonal with the different editions. So, but really you can submit any time. So, what makes a great submission to folklore? What are we really looking for? So I'll go through all of these and we'll chat a bit about them. I guess the first thing is what I mentioned before. It's shedding light on that unique Saskatchewan experience. So something that really gives a sense of what it's like to be from a particular place. Making a conscious practice to write inclusively, and we'll talk about all these in more detail. Proofread and check grammar and spelling. We'll never turn down a good story because there's a spelling mistake. It sure helps us when folks do their proofreading and stuff. Telling us sources, giving us complete histories, and telling us a bit about yourself and your bio. So we'll go through these kind of one by one. So that shedding light on a great submission to folklore. This is one of my personal favorites in the magazine since I've been here. It's just a story that happened in the 1980s about a bunch of friends who went moose hunting, had a bit of an adventure with some snowmobiles breaking down, and it's just got a really wonderful sense of what it's like to be on the land, especially it's a northern Saskatchewan story, and so it's got this great sense of what it's like to be on the land and be part of that time and place. And so it's not a giant history book story, but it's a personal experience that really gives you a sense of place. So that's a good example of that sort of a piece. The daily life history, the types of histories that don't always make it into history books. So autograph books used to be ubiquitous. A lot of us have memories of them, and we maybe don't do them as much as we used to. So those types of recordings, those sort of daily life memories are always really exciting to have and to publish. It's another kind of example of those unique Saskatchewan experiences. And of course, the rhymes that go into an autograph book and the creativity that's involved in that is also a really interesting, unique thing to record. Unique Saskatchewan experiences. So this is another one of my favorites, my Florence Wong. It's also a story of running a Chinese cafe in Wadena and the experience of owning and operating that cafe. And then of course, people have many entry points to that same story because lots of people like to eat in cafes, and Chinese cafes are kind of a part of the Saskatchewan landscape. So it's just again shedding light on that Saskatchewan experience. So this is another one. It's a harvest story. Of course, we've published many harvest stories in folklore over the years, but this is an interesting one about a new bride. She's supposed to take the meals out to the folks who are harvesting, and she gets lost, and there's dust everywhere, and she just kind of has an adventure. This happens in the 1970s, and so again, these don't have to be old stories, right? To be interesting stories, and it's just a very unique personal experience. So it's talking about something we talk about all the time, which is harvest, but a particular interesting personal experience. Take us through the rest of our presentation, and we can have some more discussion time. So just to reorient us, we were talking about what makes a great submission to folklore. We talked about unique Saskatchewan experiences, and now we're on to making it a conscious writing practice to write inclusively. So what does that mean? Obviously, this is right in our writer guidelines, so it's just important to state it, obviously. Anything that is racist, homophobic, transphobic, any of those types of things obviously will not get published, so that's just a good thing to note. But other things to think about, checking your writing for language that's outdated, checking your language for language that's othering. It should be used respectfully at all times, and if you're not sure, always feel free to ask. These are all things that all of us have to learn and practice. So if you call the staff and say, I'm not sure what this language, we're happy to help you. So always make sure to ask if you're not sure. And build awareness of your own unconscious biases. So those kinds of things can come out in writing. So even having thoughts about that will make you a better writer. So those are some of the things that are reflected in our guidelines.
Kristin, what's ableism?
Ableism is prejudice against folks who have disabilities.
Oh, yeah, of course. Okay.
So, what else makes a great submission? Proofread and check grammar and spelling. Now, again, as before, we will never reject a good story for grammar, but it sure helps if us to do the work. It helps the editors if you have someone else proofread it, all that kind of stuff. So I won't say too much about that, but give it a whirl. I hesitated to even put it in there, just because even if something comes in that's got quite a bit of disjointed grammar, we'll try to fix it up and work with the writer, just because we do want to have those great stories coming in. So don't worry too much about it. But just like to mention it. What else makes a great submission to folklore? Tell us your sources. So it depends on what kind of a story you're writing. If it's a personal story, you're the source, of course. You don't need a reference for that. It's just you. If it happened in your community or someone told you about it, you can reference that person by saying, my auntie shared this story with me, or in my community, this is how the story goes. So and the idea is to be able to have people in the future track back where you got your information from, especially if they're interested in that particular history that you're relating. Okay, if it's a family member, you sort of reference them. That's your reference. So just as a good example of this one, Norma Galambos wrote a story about the Paris Cafe. So it was run by a Chinese-Canadian family, and she makes it clear, like in her story, especially in her acknowledgments, that she worked with the family to construct the history part of it that she didn't personally experience. So she worked with the grandchildren to be able to write that part of it. And then she switched into the part that she knew personally, which was being a waitress there. So she kept the things that she knew, her personal experience, and focused the story on that, and then really referenced how she got her information for the stuff that she didn't have a personal experience of. So just being mindful about that, sharing your sources, and that kind of thing. So if you're writing about something you didn't experience personally, maybe you're doing a bit of research on the web or in books, that kind of thing, then we do want actual references for that. And again, it's just to be able to help folks track back where you got your information from. And of course, you can find the details on this in the writer's manual, but Chicago Manual of Style. Footnotes are preferred. And the other thing, so speaking of our sources and things like that, and speaking also of writing things that are broader and more regional, so say you're doing a regional history of the area where you grew up, or a community history, give us a complete history, give us the full history. And what we mean by that is don't leave anybody out. So if you've left out, say for example, the indigenous peoples in the region that you're writing about, you're not letting us know the complete history of the area. So make sure you're not leaving anybody out in your writing, especially if it's a personal experience that happened to you in a small area in your life. That's your story, and that's fine. If you are doing something a bit broader, make sure you're including all of the histories in that area. So that means don't leave anyone out. If you're writing a regional or community history, acknowledge the histories of indigenous peoples in the region and the colonial context of settlement as well, especially because you have to be able to give us the full history of how that place came to be. Tell us about yourself. So we always ask for bios for our authors, and particularly, it's important to just tell us a little bit about what your connection to the writing is. So Folklore essentially encourages authors of nonfiction to briefly address their connection to the topic of their writing. So tell us what your interest in this area is, just to give your readers a chance to evaluate your connection to the subject and what it is that you're saying about it. And of course, you can also talk about your achievements and your other writing achievements, that kind of thing. And how do you submit? Now, we have a spanking new online form that you can use. You can upload your submissions directly, but we will, of course, continue to accept submissions in all the ways that we always have. So we still accept handwritten submissions. We still accept submissions by email. We certainly accept photos through the mail. If you don't want to scan them yourself, we'll scan them and send them back to you. And we do have an online form now, which you can use and which will upload your stuff directly into our database, which saves a step for us as well. So it's handy for us if you're able to use the online form. So I will, just because the form won't let me show it to you without filling in with something, I'm going to just show you pictures of the form, not the actual form. But when you go to the form, it's just a Google form, so you'll see something that looks like this. You've got places to put in your name, first name, last name. You don't have to give us your email, but that really helps, especially if you need to get a hold of you about your submission for something. Phone numbers, mailing address, we have to have a place to send your check to you. All that kind of stuff. You can upload your bio directly, just paste it right in. You can paste your photo, your headshot, your author headshot right in there as well. So you just click on Add File, which is just, you can see here on the bottom, you just click on Add File. You'll get a box like this. You can drag your photo from your computer right to there, or you can browse to it. And you just hit the upload button, and your bio or your photo is stored with us. And you move on to the next page where you can tell us the title of your submission. You'll have a drop-down menu where you can tell us whether it's a feature photo or an article or a book review or whatever. And you can actually upload your submission directly, so it's really easy for the editor to just grab it and have a look. No more searching through all the files to find it. You can give us a spot to say what your photos are and how many photos you've sent along with us, and you can upload those photos as well. So, and then of course, the last page is just giving first North American serial rights, and all that means is that you're giving Folklore Magazine the right to publish your work first. Once it's been published, the copyright reverts back to you, and you can publish it somewhere else if you like. And some notes, if there's anything special, you can let us know about it.